let's look at the forms of greetings. Dear Mr. Sharma, like I told you, let's assume this client's name is Subhash Sharma. So if you're writing to him for the first time, what would be impressive would be something like, Dear Mr. Sharma. And please remember, as soon as the name ends, S-H-A-R-M-A, so as soon as we've written A or typed A, please immediately put a comma. Do not leave space between the last letter of the name and the comma. And it's mandatory to put a comma. Now, other typical greetings would be, Hi Ravi. This would be in case of instances where you have a very good rapport with the client. You're already communicated with the client several times and you're very comfortable, both of you. Hello Anand is also acceptable. Though I would prefer that you reserve the hello to telephone calls. Now, Dear Girish is also respecting the customer or the client a lot. It's formal, but the client or the customer has given you the permission to use his first name. Dear Mr. Menon is when you are being very formal. You're writing maybe to the customer or the client for the first time, or when you know the customer or the client is somebody who's very professional. My dear friends, we have 3 different types of clients or customers. The first type would be somebody who's very, very professional. How can you make out that a client is very professional? When he doesn't chit-chat, he doesn't waste time on any soft skills, or, the client doesn't need to use soft skills with us. We need to use soft skills with the client. But you can easily make out by his email that he's somebody very professional and he's only talking about the work-related matters. So in such a case, we also need to be very professional with them. Second type of client would be somebody who's semi-professional and semi-personal. So with such a person, you can unwind a little bit. For example, if he writes an email to you and says, hey, how are you doing there? Heard that the climate is very hot. So please reply back to him and say, thank you so much. I'm doing fine. How are you doing? Yes, indeed it is very hot here. So that much of liberty you can give yourself. But remember, my friends, the customer or the client can never be your friend. Please always maintain limitations. Draw a line and do not cross the line. You need to be very careful where that is concerned. Now, the third type of client or a customer will be a customer or a client who's very friendly. But we need to remember that the customer or the client can never be our friend. So we cannot cross boundaries and become too pally with the customer or a client. Please maintain the reserve that should be maintained when we are dealing with customers or with clients, and don't get too friendly with the customer or client, even if they speak to you very friendly. You cannot do that. They can afford to be professional. They can afford to be semi-professional. And they can also afford to be friendly because they are the client. And the client or the customer is always right. But we are the employees. So we need to maintain one limit and not cross that limit. Okay, now, the style depends on the client's stylistic guidelines. You need to find out who's your target audience. By saying target audience, I mean to say the person that you're sending an email to. You need to know, if it's possible, whether you're writing to somebody young, you're writing to somebody old. Is it an informal email or is it a formal email? You can't always get to know. It's not always easy to make out whether the client is young or old. But if you can know, you can, change your style a little bit. Now, when we deal with children, we are normally very sweet with them and we become like children. We talk like a child. At the same time, when we deal with older people, elderly people, we are more respectful. If it's an informal email, you don't need to be very careful or strict. But if it's a formal email, you need to be very professional. Now let's look at the formatting. The greeting always ends with a comma. Like discussed earlier, there will be no space between the customer's name and the comma. As soon as the name finishes, you put a comma, no space. There's a single or two spaces blank, separating the greeting from the header. This mainly is done because it gives the email a visually pleasing look. It makes the email more readable. Between the greeting and the header, you can give either one space or two. The salutation, we already discussed the salutation. Okay guys, what are the forms of salutation where a male is concerned? It can either be Mr. If the person is below 18 years of age, it can be Master. It can be Doctor. When you write it, D-O-C full stop. It can be Professor, P-R-O-F full stop. It can be Captain, C-A-P-T full stop. For a lady, if you're very sure that the lady is not married, then you can write it as M-I-S-S, Miss. If you're very sure that the lady is married, then write it as M-R-S full stop. However, if you don't know whether the lady is married or unmarried, you don't know her marital status, then it would be very safe to write M-S full stop. M-S full stop is pronounced as Ms. Now, let's continue. There's a single space between the salutation, M-R, Mr, full stop, single space, and then the name. And guys, like we discussed earlier, you only put the salutation in front of the last name and not in front of the first name. Though, in a few areas, there are exceptions. Where, let's say for maybe in Tamil Nadu, you always put a salutation in front of the first name. That is only because the last name is the name of the father. Srinivas Raghavan. Raghavan would be the name of the father. So if you address him as Mr. Raghavan, he'll get very confused and he'll tell you, I'm sorry, my father's name is Raghavan, I'm not Raghavan. So let's forget about the exceptions here. But normally global etiquette says that we put a salutation in front of the last name and not the first name. Now let's look at the header. Header can be greetings. Header can be greetings from XYZ company. Header can be how are you doing? Or it can be how are you? It can be hope you're doing fine. Now why do we use headers? Because headers break the ice. Headers create a good rapport. Headers make the communication style more polite and friendly. The variety is large. Some possible headers are, thank you for your email. Never say mail for email. Mail only refers to the hard copy which goes through the post office. When you tell somebody that I will mail it to you, that person will be expecting you to send the hard copy through the post office. But if you're planning to send it by the electronic media, then you will always have to say email and not mail. So you say thank you for your email, or you say thanks for your email, or you can say hello from Vinod, but I prefer, like I told you earlier, to drop the hello. Greetings from Lena. Thank you for shopping at Amazon.com. Thank you for choosing MakeYourTrip.com to make your travel arrangements. So these are a few examples of the headers. Now let's look at the format. The header is usually kept short and sweet. Do not have 2 sentences as the header. They just should be a few words. Do not mix the header with the main content of the email. So the header and the body should be kept separate by one single blank line. Don't continue the body of the email along with the header. After you write the header, leave one space and then start the body of the email. Now, we come to the body of the email. You can look at an example there, and I think we have already gone through it. So we continue with the body of the email, which may consist of either one or more of the following elements. The body of the email may have paragraphs, bulleted lists, numbered lists, indented paragraph and bulleted numbered lists. So either the body will have paragraphs, or it may have bulleted or numbered lists, or it may be a combination of paragraphs and the bulleted or numbered lists. All these elements will be separated from each other by one single space. Please remember that you will not use the tabs to format. The formatting will be done only by using the space bar. Please take an example of the email in front of you. Now we are referring more to the font that needs to be used. The paragraph on the left is Courier font, but it's less readable and not very pleasing to the eye. On the other hand, the paragraph on the right, which is the same message as what it is on the left, is in Times New Roman font and definitely more clear and readable. If you look at this page, the font used is Tahoma. Now, when do you use bulleted or numbered lists? When you're presenting multiple pieces of information. It can be used for information relating to data, numbers, process-specific explanation, direction, etc. Now let's look at the footer. If you remember, I had told you that the header and the footer are equally important. You start off with a very good header to create a good impression, first impression, and you end with a very good footer so that the entire email is impressive. An example of a footer is, I hope this information helps, but if in case you have any further questions about your account, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you. Guys, in written communication, we is always better than I. Because you're working as a team, you're writing to the client or the customer on behalf of the organization. So it's always better to use a we. In case the client has written to you asking you for some information, you will say, please feel free to contact us in case of any further information that may be required. But in case the client wanted some help from you in solving a problem, wanted a solution from you, then you can write, please feel free to contact us in case of any further assistance that may be required. Footer's main job is to wrap up the email or close the email. Some possible footers are, I hope this information helps, but if not, or if you have any further questions about your account, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thanks for conducting business with us, and we hope to see you again. Once again, thank you for your order. We look forward to earning your business as we set out to be the best place to buy on the internet. If you have any questions or concerns about your order, please contact us using one of the following options. We will make every effort to answer your question or resolve your concern as soon as possible. Thank you again for shopping at eBay. These are a few possible footers, but the ones that can be used or mainly used are, please feel free to contact us for any further information or assistance as per the situation. You put assistance or information. Please feel free to contact us for any further assistance or for any further information that may be required. Format. The footer is no longer than a paragraph. Do not make the footer very long. It just contains a thank you note. Signature. Signature comes in different varieties. One may be personalized, where your name is included. The other may be generic, where your name is not included. So the information that comes along in the signature would be your company name, department name, if you have a URL, the company tagline, some companies use a tagline, the promotional URL, etc. So you can see a few examples in front of you of Pratibha, customer support, yahoo.com. Mike D'Souza, he's the head of operations. The address is 10 International Services Limited, Bangalore. His hand phone is so-and-so. His land phone is so-and-so. The third one is Sudarshan Bose, Assistant Manager Programming. His URL is HTTP, and you see it for yourself. Then you also have the telephone number. The style of English reflects the cultural background of the individual. We spoke about American English and British English, and we also spoke about the fact that British English is far more standardized. Indian writing is generally more indirect. We don't write directly what the issue is. We use too many sentences where we should not be using. We need to come to the point fast. American English does not observe too much of propriety. It's not too correct. They use a lot of slangs. They use a lot of jargons. Slangs are words like yeah, which should be avoided. Slangs may be words like screwed up, pissed off. Definitely should not be used in official communication. Jargons are things like short forms. Example, writing ASAP. We should not write any abbreviations in written communication. ASAP stands for as soon as possible. So please write the entire words and not short forms. Do not just write FYI for your information and send off an email. Absolutely not acceptable. Please write the full words. Somebody who uses incorrect grammar implies lack of professionalism. So you need to be very careful about your grammar and your language when you write an email, because it would reflect badly on the company, on your company. Spellings. Like incorrect grammar, incorrect spellings also indicate a lack of professionalism. Please always make sure that your spell check is on, because we don't want the organization that we are working for, we don't want it to have a bad impression on other people. There is also a difference between American and British English. Some words are spelled differently. For example, The word tire, we write T-Y-R-E for the vehicle tire in British English. But in American English, the same meaning, the word would be written as T-I-R-E. So we need to be very careful that we observe American English spelling when we write to American clients or American customers. Now, let's talk about punctuation. If you remember, I told you punctuation is very, very important. Please look at the screen in front of you and look at the paragraph which has absolutely no punctuation. Please read through. The lines read, "Dear Anuj, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You're generous, kind, thoughtful people who are not like you. Admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever. When we are apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be your Sheila? Will you let me be yours, Sheila?" Now these lines, the meaning can entirely change if you put the proper punctuation marks in the proper place, or it can convey something else if you do not put the proper punctuation marks in the proper place. So let's take a look. The same few lines that we had read earlier. Now please look at this in front of you. The proper punctuation in the proper place. "Dear Anuj, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, and thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we are apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours?" So this is something which is very clear, and the moment you read it, you know exactly what it means. Now let's look at another example where the meaning totally changes. "Dear Anuj, I want a man who knows what love is." These are the same lines, the same words. Words have not been changed at all, but the punctuation marks have been put in a different place. "I want a man who knows what love is. All about you are generous, kind, thoughtful people who are not like you. Admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me. For other men, I yearn. For you, I have no feelings whatsoever. When we are apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be?" Now guys, tell me, you read the same few sentences with the first time you read it with punctuation marks in different places. The second one had punctuation marks in again different places. But now you see how different the two messages were, almost opposite. So now I hope you realize what big part punctuation marks play in our communication style. It can entirely change the meaning of the message. So whenever you write an email, please make sure that the proper punctuation marks are there in the proper places. Now let's look at another example. A college professor wrote the words, "A woman without her man is nothing," on the blackboard and asked his students to punctuate it correctly. Let's see what his student did. The same sentence, the males wrote, "A woman without her man is nothing." All the females wrote, "A woman without her man is nothing." So now do you see how much these punctuation marks matter in our communication style? They totally change the meaning of what we write. So we need to be extremely careful that in business writing, we need to follow the punctuation marks and place them in the appropriate place so that our communication is effective and the person who reads our emails understands it the way we want them to understand it. Now, what weeds? By weeds we mean, what are the problems in written communication? What are the mistakes that we make while sending emails? Redundancies. We use a lot of redundancies. What are redundancies? For example, when you're talking about a gift is something that is already free. You don't ever pay for a gift, do you? When you get a gift on your birthday, do you pay for the gift? You don't. So why do we need to say something like free gift? Makes no sense. Now, when you're talking about belongings, your belongings are always personal. They belong to you. So why do we need to say something like personal belongings? So we are unnecessarily adding words to our sentences and making our sentences too long. Now let's look at a few other phrases. Instead of saying at a later date, why can't we just be simple and say later? Instead of saying with regard to, we can just use one word, say about. Instead of saying in the near future, we can say soon. Instead of saying in the amount of, we can say for. So now what I mean to say is, please do not use too many unnecessary words. When you can write one sentence and convey the meaning across, why do we need to use 3 or 4 sentences? With little words can also actually clutter your email. They can also sort of throw a very confusing impression in the minds of the people who are reading your email. Instead of saying, where's the meeting at? So which word here do you think is not necessary? The word at. Is this enough to say where's the meeting? Instead of saying where are you going to, it would be fine to say where are you going? He returned back to the office. The word return already means going back or giving back. So when you say he returned back to the office, you are actually saying he went back to the office. So you will never put a back after return. You will just say he returned to the office. Similarly, there's a word like revert, but you will not say I will revert back to you, but you will say I will revert to you. Always make it a point or a habit that once you compose an email, you will read it again. It will just barely take you a couple of minutes to read your email. Never send an email without rechecking it. Even though you may be very busy, you may have lots of work, you may have a lot of pressure, but please always recheck your email before you compose and send. You compose your email, then recheck it again, and then send the email. Make sure you've put the subject. Never send an email without a subject. It's very unprofessional. Always spell check. When you're reading again, make sure that there are no grammar errors. Make sure that you have actually written your name where inside the bracket it says signature on official forms. Guys, we discussed before, we do not use BCC in official communication. Check the email address in the to field. Make sure that you've got the email address correct. Otherwise, it will not reach the person that you want it to reach. We have already discussed punctuation. Punctuation must be correct. You put a space before a comma is not right. You do not leave a space before a comma, but you leave a space after the comma is there, then you leave a space and then you start a word. So when you do not leave a space after the comma, it becomes an error. Now let's say again the same thing. I don't want you to get confused. Before you put a comma, before the comma, you should not leave a space. But you must leave a space after the comma and start the next word. You must leave a space after the colon or the full stop. But not before, but after. One error is leaving space before a colon, semicolon, comma, etc. So you never leave space before all this, you always leave space after this. Never send anybody an email entirely in capitals. The person who reads it is going to think that you're in a very bad mood and you're shouting at him. It's totally rude to send an email in full capitals. The capital will come only when you write a name. The first letter of any name should be a capital. The first letter of any new sentence that you're starting should be capital. Otherwise, you will not use capital. Never use tabs in email. The formatting becomes inconsistent. You will only use the space bar. Do not use multiple fonts within the same email. Etiquette says that we will use the same font throughout the entire email. Do not also differentiate between sizes of the words that you're writing. Make sure you maintain the same size. Do not use unnecessary colors. First of all, they will not show up. They may or may not show up. And second of all, it does not look good. So use the same color. Do not use abbreviations. You remember that earlier we talked about jargons. Similarly, you never use abbreviations, which are the short forms. Please write the entire word. Do not use short forms. Now, in official communication, if you put a smiley in your email, the person who reads it will think that you are not very professional. So please do not use smileys. Now, if you look at this email in front of you, the email was written with a person who used the tab instead of the space bar. So you can look there, the details of the data. The spacing is not correct because the tab has been used and not the space bar. We always need to use space bar and not tab for email formatting. There's one more sample here. Again, it's the same thing. The spacing has not been done well because the person has used a tab. We need to use the space bar. And the second mistake here would be that the details like company, address, town, state, etc., they're all in capitals, which is not supposed to be done. Now you can look at this particular email. How do you find this email? Again, the same problem here. The spacing looks good, but the company, the address, town, state and all are all in capitals, which we don't normally allow or which is not supposed to be used. Now you can look at this one. I'm sure by now you will be able to point out the mistakes yourself. We will be discussing in a short while, and meanwhile we continue. The tone of your email, like your voice can either be polite or be rude or be indifferent. Indifferent is a tone which means that the person doesn't care. So when you're communicating with somebody, you need to be very polite. You need to have good manners. Usage of please, thank you, I request you, I apologize, I'm sorry, does not make you small. It just shows that you're a very well-behaved person, you're a very cultured person, and it's just good manners. It makes the client or the customer who's reading your email, makes that person feel good. Avoid patronizing the recipient. Please keep in mind a few points. The first thing is you avoid patronizing the recipient. For example, as we are the technical experts, we have decided. These sort of statements should be avoided. It's as if you're trying to dominate the client or the customer, that we have decided. Since we are technical experts, we have decided. You cannot speak to a client or a customer in this way. Now, maintain a friendly tone by avoiding negative words. What we can do for you by tomorrow is, instead of saying we cannot do this tomorrow, never be negative in your communication. You should always be very positive. I can't do, I don't know, I will not do, we cannot do. Are words which should be avoided. Instead, the same thing can be conveyed in a more positive way by saying what we can do by tomorrow is. Always begin with a pleasant header, but keep in mind the context of the email, especially when responding to a chain mail. You should always make sure that when you receive a chain email, that you delete it. Now sometimes what happens is we receive a lot of spam emails. There will be a picture of God, and the wordings below that would be something like, please forward this by 8 p.m. Something very good will happen to you. Forward it to 20 people. If you don't forward it to 20 people, something very bad will happen to you. Please don't even bother about such emails and delete them the moment you see them. Do not reply to a spam email. Do not forward chain emails. Now guys, one more thing. When we are communicating by email to our clients or our customers, we need to make sure that we maintain the message thread. What is a message thread? It's very simple. All of you are doing it, but maybe you don't know the term. A message thread is maintained when you are writing to a client, the client is replying back to you on the same email, you are replying back to him on the same email, he's replying back to you on the same email. So what you're doing is, you're maintaining the same email, but keeping on adding to it. You should always maintain this message thread. Do not keep composing new emails all the time, because it will be very difficult for you to track some email that you would have sent to the client maybe a month ago or 2 months ago or something. So make sure that you maintain the message thread. We were just talking about speaking in a positive tone, because negativity produces resistance from the customer or the client. We need to be very positive. When you're positive, the client or the customer will immediately trust you. He will know that you're very reliable. He will know that you're there to help him. Now let's look at a few negative and positive comments. First, the negative one would be, no smoking anywhere except the bar. The same sentence can be said in a very positive way. For example, smoking permitted in the bar only. Next, which is negative. Positively, no children admitted without an adult. This can be said in a very positive way. Children welcome when accompanied by an adult. If you look at it, the meaning is the same. But instead of putting it in a negative way, let's always talk positive. One more example. Negative. We cannot process applications received after June 10th. The same thing in a positive way could be, please return the application before the June 10 deadline. So you're saying the same thing, is the same message, but you're putting it in a more positive way. Look at this. I mean, this is what I suppose must be happening every day in everybody's house. Dear Andy, how have you been? The father is sending his son an email. Your mother and I are fine. We miss you. Please sign off your computer and come downstairs for something to eat. love dad. So this shows how much the children these days are so hooked onto computers. Let's look at some tips. Before answering the email, list down all the questions that are asked. This confirms to the customer that all the questions that are asked will indeed be answered in full. The client has the faith and the trust that whatever he is asking will be fully answered and not in parts. If there are more than 2 questions, then quote each question and insert the answers after them. Now, for example, if a client writes to you and he's got 10 questions, he wants the answers from you for all the 10 questions. Please do not write the answers for 8 questions and send them to him. You will force him to send one more email asking you for the answers for the other 2 questions that you did not reply to. So whenever you get an email, make sure that you send the complete information. Anticipate the next possible question. It's possible that you can guess what is coming next from him. So in advance, you can always answer him. Do not provide unwanted information. Do not give him the information for something that he has not asked you for. Be brief when you write emails. Follow the policy of KISS. Keep it short and simple. Please look at a few sample emails here. When a client has asked you for many answers to many questions, it's always advisable that you write the answers along with the questions that he's asked you. Now you have the questions, just put your answer below that. It's always easy for him to understand very clearly what you mean. So when you are sending the answers to questions, make sure that either you copy paste or just use the questions that he has sent you, and each question should be there just above the answer. Question number 1, question number 2, question number 3. Question 1, the answer. Question 2, the answer. Question 3, the answer. So it becomes very clear as to what you're trying to actually convey to him. If the query has multiple questions, quote each question and follow up with the appropriate answer. Each answer should be separate for each question. We can look at this email. Please look through the emails, the sample emails, so that we can discuss once the session is over. Now, what has happened here is this person, Srijat, has written the answer, but the original question is not there in the response. So it's possible that the client get confused. The client who's penned here may get confused wondering which answer which is the answer to which question. So it's always good to include the original question. Now please look at this email. It's a sample email. And here, you can look at the first line which says, folks, the job involves. Now the mistake done here is leaving a space before the colon. We had discussed earlier that you don't leave space before the colon or before the full stop or before the comma. So this is an error. You will look at they are in points, but they should have been bulleted properly. So this is just a hyphen. The bullets are missing. After grammar, there's a comma, but after the comma, there's no space, so that is a mistake. After format, there's a comma, but after the comma, there's no space. Now, if you look at other things like the second line, the second para, I think we may look at proofreaders in publishing houses and sub-editors in English language newspapers. After comma, there's no space before magazine. Again, when you're looking at the third paragraph, there are no bullets, but they're just hyphen marks. Similarly, if you look at the last paragraph, in order to validate this premise, there's a space before the comma, which is a mistake. So guys, we will again, I hope you've been noting down all this so that we can discuss once the session is over. Now you can look at this email. What will you actually observe here? You will observe the fact that DTP is underlined with red. Affordability is underlined with red. We are not supposed to use colors. You maintain one color. You're not supposed to use different colors. Now look at this email. There's no proper greeting. There's just a Sanjeev. Nothing in front of Sanjeev. Look at the other places which have been marked with red. Third, aliens, comma, there should be a space before Delhi. Total pool size of French-speaking people available each year. Space was not required there. There's space there. Again, the next highlighted point is after the semicolon, there should have been space before travel. There's no space there. The next one is current salary levels. After levels, there should not have been any space before the colon, but the space is given there. Now, disadvantages. If you look at the lower one, if you look at it again, there's a spacing problem. Look at the next line, required, REQD, is a short form which is not acceptable in business communication. So the entire word should have been written REQUIRED. Collected for German. After the comma, there should have been space. After Spanish, after the comma, there should have been space. So this entire thing is mostly to do with the space problem. Now if you look at this email, what is your opinion about this email? We do not use bold to emphasize a point. Some emails, some computers will not reflect this bold. Your font should be the same. We do not unnecessarily use bold or underline the words. This is a sample of a bad email. Subject says meeting. Hi Jim, I just wanted to remind you about the meeting we had scheduled next week. Do let me know if you have any questions. Best wishes, Mark. Now what are the problems here? What are the errors? Number one, the subject has a very generic thing, meeting. And as discussed earlier, every organization conducts different type of meetings. So what does Mark mean here when he says meeting? If you were to read this email, what meeting would you understand? There's no date mentioned, nothing is mentioned, just meeting. So the first thing about the subject is a generic subject. It should have mentioned what type of a meeting it is and the date that the meeting is going to take place. Hi Jim, I just wanted to remind you about the meeting. Again, he doesn't even mention what type of meeting, when is it. He says next week. Next week has 7 days, so which day is he talking about? Do let me know if you have any questions. It's such a vague email. It's not at all specific. And my dear friends, business communication is all about being only specific and not generic. He has not even ended the email properly. He just says best wishes. Good email sample. Now the subject, if you look at, it's a reminder of 10 a.m. meeting schedule, so and so. It's a very specific subject. Hi Jim, the same message you saw earlier has been rewritten in a good way, in a very specific way. Hi Jim, I just wanted to remind you about the meeting we have scheduled for Monday, October 5th at 10 a.m. It's being held in conference room number A. We will be discussing the new PAS process. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. Best wishes, Mark. Now you see there's such a big difference between the email that you saw earlier and this email, because this is a very specific email and very easy to understand. Now you can look at this email. Topic, attention mark. Subject. Can you imagine anybody writing, this is for Mark only, and if you're not him, delete. It's a very bad email. Mark, the ball game the other day was just sweet. I know we are the best team. Mark, you're the coolest. Tim. In no way does it look like an official email. Even to a friend, you will not write an email like this. So if anybody writes an email like this to a client or a customer, the customer or the client, after reading this, will have the worst possible impression about this person. Now, if you look at the right side, this is also a very bad email. Topic, officers meeting. Subject. In the subject, he writes, I was emailing you, he writes, I was emailing you to tell you that we will have a meeting this Thursday at McDonald's. We will be going over the month's community service projects. See you there. No punctuation marks. Subject is not proper. There's no subject at all. And the body itself is so vague. So both of these are bad emails. The first email, which you saw earlier in the earlier slide on the left, the first email was just plain rude and stupid. It's rude to fill up other people's emails with personal stuff that you could take the time to find Mark's email and email him directly instead of CCing it to so many other people. Also, what if there were people from other teams reading that email? So what this guy should have done is he should have sent that email only to Mark's email ID and not CC'd the other people on it, because that was a totally personal email. Personal emails are only meant for personal email ID and should not be sent over the official email ID. The second example that we saw in the earlier slide was also totally absurd and vague. The non-officers might have, read that email. So no point in wasting other people's time when you don't intend that message to be for other people. Now we look at this email. Topic, problems at the club office. Subject. This week the construction going on around the office has been sort of destructive. The power has been cut at the office and there's no power. If you're planning on going by the office to work on project, please try next week. The other email says, topic is the web page as assignment. Subject, there's no subject. As you all know, the deadline for turning in your pages you are designing is March 24th. Please have these completed by that time and up on FTP. Hope everyone gets this done as ASAP. The email is very informative. It's also meant for everybody who's reading that email. It was not meant for one person, but just CCing other people. No, it was meant for everybody else. It did not make any personal comment. It's okay if you want to add jokes or comments that the whole group understands or that the whole group should be knowing about. Second email is a perfect example of a deadline or meeting time email. It was not sent just for a select few, but for the entire club. Make sure if you email at any time, you make sure that the email is similar to all the formats. That, when you send an email, please keep in mind that not everybody will have the latest model of a computer. There are some people who may own a computer wherein if you send a particular attachment, they may not be able to open it and read it. So you must make sure that anybody with any type of a computer will be able to open it. Now, this is a bad email again. You can read it. Note down the mistakes so we can discuss it. Now, what do you think about this email? It's totally improper. Email etiquette is not observed. And imagine having a subject which says, what do you think? There's no opening, there's no header, nothing. There's no closing. This person talks too much. There's more personal in this than actually what is work related. It was my pleasure being with all of you. Thank you that you understood.